How much do you have left to sluice?
I mean, there's a fair bit in there.
Like a couple days?
I'd say, yeah, probably 3 days.
1 minute ago, something incredible just happened at Parker Schnabel's claim. This jaw-dropping moment was so unexpected that even his crew member couldn't believe their eyes. But before we delve into the mind-blowing discovery that is sure to change the gold rush as we know it, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications, because this story isn't your regular mining story. It is a masterpiece revelation that will leave you wanting more. So, let's retrace our steps to where it all began. Picture this: the deep crevices of the Yukon, where Parker and his team had been pushing through one of the hardest mining seasons they had ever faced. They were going through the most challenging times, from equipment breaking down to the unpredictable weather and even the sudden rise in fuel prices that was eating into their margins. Things were getting really tight, so no one really saw what happened next. If there was one thing everyone knew about Parker Schnabel, his team, and viewers alike, it was that he wasn't the kind of guy who took too well to failure. He hated the very idea of it and would do anything to avoid failure. So everything he gained, every ounce of gold he got, wasn't a matter of luck. It came from all the hard work he put into it. And with every setback he faced, more and more money was gone. But that wasn't the only thing he lost. Whenever there was a setback, it was also eating away at his pride. When Parker Schnabel returned to the Yukon, he didn't realize how much things would change. This time, he wasn't just striking gold. He was also going against the book and taking a ride on the wild side with no harness on, in a single painstaking mission that went on for 4 days. Parker executed a solo excavation that mined a certainly unbelievable $75 million in raw gold. This wasn't an ordinary haul. It was so far from it that even veteran miners and fans couldn't believe their eyes. This mind-blowing discovery came from all those days of hard work. It was just Parker and his specialized machinery and a claim that everyone else had written off as worthless for over 50 years. You see, Parker had had enough of playing by the rules. He was more interested in following his gut instincts as well as the trail where the industry saw failure time and again. Parker had a different instinct, and he had calculations he believed in wholeheartedly. He followed through on them all the way to this generational opportunity that can only be a result of planning, preparation, and possibly the hand of divine intervention. To truly understand how much of a big deal this all is, you have to remember where Parker has come from in his entire mining journey. This has absolutely nothing to do with his early life and more to do with those hard seasons he faced that almost broke him. Back in earlier seasons of Gold Rush, several moments seemed bleak and fruitless. One time, Parker and his team fought to pull over 7,000 ounces from Scribner Creek, and it was a haul that was worth nearly $10 million at the time. This was the kind of work he put into where he was at now, and working that hard at the time made him one of the youngest millionaires in the mining world. However, thinking about the hardship he faced and the success he earned from it still doesn't compare to the discovery we are seeing now. This is something Bigger and even more impressive than all his other claims. Parker utilized everything at his disposal to make this happen. From his impressive skills to his intuition for geology and his drive, which could only be described as relentless and bold. This is how he unearthed an abandoned piece of land, only to make the most profitable and high-stakes discovery of his entire career. If you really think about it, Parker's claim didn't happen just because. It happened because every dig mark and every bucket load and every recorded measurement was a well thought out and very intentional step towards solving the gold rush riddle of the century. Nobody could have possibly thought that the Yukon was hiding its most prized possession. Even underneath all that frost, there were buried pockets of gold waiting to be touched by someone relentless, bold, and probably delusional enough to keep believing, because that's what Parker Schnabel did. As you can imagine, after the discovery was made, people began to talk. Everyone was in awe and utter shock. So, the news spread quickly. Miners across the Yukon started talking about what Parker had done. And the fact remained that this wasn't just another successful find. It was an epic lesson, and a masterclass in self-reliance and geological mastery. No one could have ever imagined what was hidden beneath all the land of the Yukon. And if they did believe it, who would have thought Parker would be the one to find it and not some veteran miner in Yukon? Viewers also probably thought Parker had reached the peak of his career. He was already at the top, and not a lot of people thought there was more to come. But this claim proved that to be completely wrong, because $75 million is way beyond anyone's wildest imagination. And it is the kind of claim that turns masters into legends. To truly understand how big a deal this whole thing is, a little backstory is in order. To put things into perspective, Parker believed so profoundly in this that he stood at the entrance of the forgotten claim, a place that many people practically ignored, and some even labeled it as cursed. The entire place was probably a time bomb, waiting to go off, because time had buried the collapse-zone tunnels beneath layers of frost and ice. However, Parker had his reliable satellite imaging data, which was carefully cross-referenced with decades of geological anomalies, and it was a trustworthy piece of data that didn't lie. Beneath all the ruckus and fractured ground of the Yukon was a massive reservoir of gold that had not been touched for generations. For many years, locals had discussed a hidden fortune believed to be buried beneath the rock, estimating its value to be a massive sum. Many miners tried to reach it, but they were consistently met with failure. Most of them dismissed the rumors as mere crazy folklore, but Parker didn't. He had a strong intuition about it, and he knew he would persevere until he found what he was looking for. You might be thinking his ego, or maybe arrogance, was driving him, but that wasn't the case at all. He was primarily driven by his intellectual mind and a sheer force of focus. And above all else, he trusted the numbers instead of the stories of failure that had come before him. He went on this great big adventure, hoping to strike gold. And he did, despite all the silent and empty expanse of the Yukon, and even with every terrifying step he took on the frozen ground, some moments seemed like They could be straight out of a horror film. Moments where the wind in every sound of dried out branches sounded like a warning to him. However, he kept moving, and at least he had his maps, which had been marked with all the complex tunnel systems that didn't appear in any official government or corporate records. You might be wondering if Parker's little adventure was all gold, and you would be right in wondering, because it wasn't. There were moments where things felt bleak, but he had notes scribbled in the margins of the maps he had, and those notes hinted cryptically at hidden pockets of exceptionally rich ore, and even passages no one knew of. It almost felt as though the miners who came before him had left not just warnings but also a trail of detrimental breadcrumbs. Parker cross-referenced the maps with century-old journals. He would study them endlessly so that he knew all the final strategies and fatal mistakes of the men who had disappeared into this claim. One of the most horrifying facts was a rival miner who was known for his bottomless greed. The story goes that he attempted to claim this land only a few years before, but ultimately failed, and eventually he disappeared completely. This was what started the rumors of a curse. But Parker didn't care about this one bit. Instead, he went in fully aware of all the risks and leaned into it. The amount of work and energy he put into this was mind-blowing in itself. He did everything from sawing to lifting to leveraging and braving his way through all the rubble until the passage was finally open. The first night he spent underground wasn't the easiest. In fact, the only way to accurately describe it would be as unsettling. There was a certain aura about the entire place that wasn't easy to shake, emanating from the sounds that echoed in the tunnels. Resemblance to the kind of relics that haunt you while you're asleep. It wasn't all sunshine and roses. In fact, it was the very opposite. However, Parker was the kind of modern miner who could defy all the superstitions of the past, allowing him to step right into the future. The journey to the gold wasn't a straightforward one. It came after many clues and several moments where Parker had to adapt to his surroundings. Every bucket of ore he pulled was intentional, almost as though he was going at the pace the mine itself was allowing him to. Then there were the test samples, which were run through his portable on-site spectrometer, and it confirmed what the map had already suggested. The truth of the matter was that the gold here wasn't just plentiful. It was also unusually dense and rich, and significantly more concentrated than anything modern geological or mining models could predict. So the environment didn't take it easy on Parker whatsoever. It was fighting back every effort he made. The frost on the tunnel walls would constantly choke his pumps, and even freeze the slee lines. Parker, who had decades of northern experience, knew the only way out would be to adapt quickly. So, he did. He insulated vital lines with salvaged timber and heavy-duty tarps, R-rooted hoses around frozen sections, and improvised a heat exchanger to keep the water flowing. As time passed and the hours turned to night, the mission began to change as well. This wasn't just mining. It was now a forensic excavation and exploration. Parker mapped out all the intricate parts, cross-checked with the century-old journal warnings against the modern imaging, and then he ran yield numbers while keeping a constant eye on the structural stability of it all. You have to remember that these were ancient tunnels, fragile due to the passage of time and immense geological pressure. However, he had reliable portable machinery to help cut through and guide him safely to where he needed to go. It was also a plus that he had his headlamp's brilliant LED light, which helped him see all he needed to see. So, he carefully marked the richest pockets, measured the yields in grams, and then tracked every structural weakness with a precision that was beyond excellent. Things were finally looking up for Parker, and what had initially started with a quiet unease was now overdriven by pure anticipation. The mine was slowly opening up and everything seemed to be getting closer to his fingertips than he even realized. By the end of the second night, Parker had already pulled out several loads of high-density concentrates. The sleep boxes were filling faster than even his own calculations could have ever predicted. It was almost like the claim itself was daring him to keep going. And so he did. The inside and out of the Yukon held something greater than anyone could imagine. And Parker knew that now. He wasn't just mining anymore. He was discovering something that had been waiting for him this whole time. Through his time in the claims, Parker had to step out of his comfort zone. He was now an archaeologist and a treasure hunter. And he was determined to find all the treasures and even the relics held by the Yukon. At times, some things would happen that psyched him out, like how the light from his headlamp would catch the frost, and how the shadows along the rock walls moved in ways that might have been a little creepy. By the third night, the claim revealed its mind-blowing and incredible secret. The ground beneath Parker's excavator began to tremble, and then a sudden and massive burst of ice-cold water sprayed across the floor as Parker tried his best to steady the heavy machine. Below it all was an enormous hidden lake that was still deep and shimmering with what has been described as an impossible concentration of gold suspended beneath the surface. The chamber was unlike the narrow tunnels. Instead, it was a vast and natural underground pool with dark waters that reflected particles of gold that had been there for centuries. Parker was able to use salvaged planks, empty oil barrels, and even structural supports to quickly construct makeshift floating platforms that were strong enough to support his weight and that of a small piece of equipment that was needed. He knew that one slip or even one wrong weight distribution would be fatal. So, he had to be strategic and careful. He was able to get across the